right. Guys, I want us to go ahead and welcome Tekla here with us this morning. I discovered that this woman not only is a survivor, but she's making an impact. She just didn't curl up in a hole one day, but now she's doing something. She's letting God make something beautiful out of what the enemy meant to destroy her. And this has always been kind of an area that not very familiar with for myself, but definitely God just tugged on my heart 3 years ago. And we kind of had started talking about doing the walk. It was just in the kind of prayer stage, not really sure if that's what we needed to do. And then she came across my path. And it was so hard the times that you did come in before. I was just like, I can't talk to her now. But the very day that she came in, it was just like I looked up and she walked in the door and it was like the Lord said, now. And I was just like, awesome. And so when I got everything taken care of business-wise, got everything out of the way, we went out in the parking lot and I shared my heart with her, and that's how we met. And so it's been great. And I'm so thankful that she's here. It's like I saw this day, the day that I read that, I saw this day happening. So I'm really excited about it. But I want to just ask you a little bit. You've had some exciting news here lately. You want to share with everybody what's happened last few weeks?
Yes. So I had, so in 2000, and I guess it had been about almost 7 years, I had decided that I wasn't dating. I'd made a vow to the Lord that I was going to wait for the husband that he sent to me. And, kind of in a nutshell, I had a very best friend. He was one of my best friends in junior high school, and I hadn't seen him in years. And when I relocated back to Amarillo, he told me he was going to what church he was going to. He's going to Trinity, and invited me to church, and we started hanging out, and life just brought us back together. And so I believe firmly in my heart that God brought me back here for that reason as well. And this is my husband right here on the front row.
Now, Jacob, stand up.
And this is my daughter that I just gained through him, which I love dearly, Laura. And this is my daughter, Annabelle. And this is my lovely aunt who wrote the obituary that connected us.
Awesome. Sometimes people think, oh, it's just a coincidence. No. I will tell you, when I got that job, I would even look at the worship team. I'm like, I'm not sure why I'm here. Why would God put me in a funeral home? Okay, it's what he gave me. But now I know why. Because, like I said, I've recently got a new job. So God's kind of provided and been my path. So I know she's here for a purpose and a reason to share with you guys this morning. And I just want to ask you to just be very attentive to what she has to share this morning. And understand that some of it may make you feel uncomfortable, maybe. But understand it's with a purpose. And she's just going to bear her heart. I want us to go ahead and pray really quick before we do that, though. And then I'll turn it over to her, okay? All right, Heavenly Father, we come to you. And Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for directing, crossing paths, and putting us where we need to be. God, that's just so amazing to me every day. I think about it. And Lord, I just pray for our hearts this morning that we're open to hear what you have poured into her and what you have ministered to her and spoken to her. And God, that you help us to be aware of the lives of the people that are around us that may be affected in quite the same way. Lord, we love you, and we just ask for you to just bless her as she speaks and calm every nerve. And Lord, just help her, God, just to open up and share her heart this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Let's welcome her again.
And I first want to say that she's right. Some of it is uncomfortable, but I truly believe that as a church, if we don't get uncomfortable and we don't get angry and we're not troubled, then we're not effective as the church. And so, and then these are here because I cry a lot. So, but they're not tears of pain; they're tears of joy. And and to be honest with you, this is different for me. I go around the country. I'm a missionary with F.R.E.E. International. So we go around the country and go and do school assemblies, junior high and high schools, speaking to students. It's called the Say Something Assembly. We do that. We go to different states, and we just came from Mississippi training the governor's task force. We do all the Super Bowls. So I do mission work with them. But I'm used to talking in different states. This is the first time I've opened up in my hometown, and I haven't lived here since 1996. But I grew up here, and so I'm a little more emotional this time just because it's a little more personal. So bear with me. I don't normally have notes, and that's my sign that I'm nervous. But I just want to start by telling you a little bit about my life. When I was 13, or when I grew up in a single parent home. I grew up with my mother. My dad left when I was 1, and he was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic at the time, drug addict. So he was pretty absent in my life until later years. But my mother worked hard. She worked hard. She was an amazing mother. And the most important thing is she gave me a foundation of Christ. She definitely instilled that in me. The one thing she didn't know to teach me that I know now and she knows now is that God talks back to us, So I did a lot of praying, but no one ever taught me to do a lot of listening. But my life was my life was very stable. My mom was a great mother. She worked at Pantex all my life. She was a security officer at Pantex. So she worked a lot of long hours, had to leave early as I was a teenager, come home kind of late. And so I had a lot of idle time on my hands. So at an early age, I started admiring and emulating a little bit. There was a woman in my neighborhood, and she always had on fur coats and, just in the middle of the week, she'd be dressed up, and it was just something was intriguing about her. However, I had no idea what a broken woman she was or even where her income was coming from. But I always admired her. And at the age of 13, I snuck out of my house one night, and there was 2 girls that were there where I went. I grew up in the same neighborhood as both of them. I grew up in San Jacinto. One of them was my really good friend. We'd been friends since we were young. We were already young, but younger. And then the other was her cousin. And then we went to 2 guys that also lived in my neighborhood's home, which I knew not to go there. I absolutely knew not to go. One of them was on trial for murder at 19. The other one had already been in jail for videoing girls when we were still in Sam Houston, having sex with them. So clearly it wasn't a safe place to be, but we snuck out, and we were sitting at the table. We were sitting at a table and playing dominoes, and all of a sudden my friend reached across the table and she punched me. She punched me to the floor. So when she punched me to the floor, one of the other guys went out, and the other girl jumped on me. And your initial instinct is to fight back. But at that point, one of the guys went in and got a belt and came out and began beating me with the belt. They began taking Polaroid pictures. I remember being on the floor, just in a fetal position, and they tried to, at that time it became a sexual assault. I was sexually assaulted at that point, And when I refused and fought back, they busted a 40-ounce Colt 45 bottle, full Colt 45 bottle over my head. So at this point, I had blood coming out of my ears, my nose, every part of me. And they were talking about taking me to the truck stop. I remember hearing them say, we can take the snow, meaning I was white, to the truck stop. And I just, I thought I was going to die. I just remember holding on to hope, and I can remember the moment that I just thought it was over. And a man walked in, and he came in the door, and he was their older cousin. And he was notorious for, he was the gang member from California. He was horrible. And when he walked in, at that moment I just had little hope at that point. I thought, now my life is really over. But he did the opposite. He literally kicked one of the girls down the stairs of the apartments, threw the other one out. He ripped apart the Polaroid pictures. He picked me up. He took me in the restroom, cleaned me up, and he took me home. Now, for the next 2 weeks, I had phone calls from one of the guys, the one who was on trial for murder. He would call daily and tell me, nothing happened, right? Nothing happened. Now, in my mind, I had snuck out. So when I got home, my mother, that when I snuck back in and when she woke me up in the morning or came in my room in the morning, it was clearly I was beaten. I couldn't even, I had so many knots on my head, I couldn't lay on the pillow, so I was sitting up. And I wouldn't tell her what happened, though. I didn't tell her about the sexual assault. I buried it so far in me that I just tried to completely ignore it. But I did tell her who I had been beaten, but I refused to tell her who had done it. And so she didn't know to take me to the hospital or what to get counseling for, because she didn't know what happened until I was in my late 20s. And so after that, a piece of me died. A piece of me just, I would say literally just died. And I lost whatever self-worth I had that day. And so by the age of 16, well, after that, I was a little promiscuous. But the thing is, I came very withdrawn as well. And I look back, and I think when I go into school assemblies, I tell teachers, look at your students, pay attention to them. And I'll tell you in the church, pay attention, because people in the church are lost and hurting and broken, and you don't know what's going on in their home life. So open your eyes and pay attention, because nobody noticed. I went to San Jacinto. My mom had taken me out of public school and put me in San Jacinto Christian Academy. So the classes were very small. So a teacher should notice a difference in a child. You spend, more time at school than you do home. And I began sitting in the back of the classroom. I began sitting in the back. But no one said anything. No teacher, no one. I became withdrawn. My grades even went down. Everything changed. And then at the time, my mother just, took me to counseling for my behavior and stuff, and I was just labeled as a bad child, but nobody ever really dug into the genesis of the dysfunction or looked at what could have happened, and no one ever reached me. And so by the age of 16, I was a mess, and I moved in with a much older man. He was 25 years old, and he beat me profusely. He'd beat me with a steel-toe boot and put me in the hospital. And the neighbors would call the police, and the police would come, and it was so embedded in me that you don't snitch. I grew up with a neighborhood and with people that you just don't snitch. You just don't. That's not what you do. So I would never tell the police what was going on. My mother had tried. She had fought for me. I want to be very clear that my mother fought. And we don't have, at the time, there wasn't people advocating for children like there are now. At the time, it was just like, well, my mother talked to several people, and the advice that was given to her was have your child emancipated to keep you out of trouble. And so my mother refused to have me emancipated. So she didn't do that. But I did move out at 16. That shortly before I turned 17, I moved in with the man that was older. And that was just horrible abuse. He would wake me up in the middle of the night while I was sleeping and just start beating me in my head, like where you see stars, like waking up to that. So, but I left him. And shortly after that, I took a bus, the Greyhound bus, to New York City. And I think I had maybe like $150. I don't know if any of you have been to New York, but you can't even get a hotel room for $150 there. So I ended up in New York with just very little money. I remember I'm speaking in Amarillo now, so we all know where V&M is. And I went to V&M, and at the time you could buy like hot fries for 25 cents and little beef jerkies for 25 cents. So I had my backpack full of beef jerky and hot fries, and I was going to run away to New York and be a writer. But at the time I was 18, so I was legal. And I left for New York, and it was there that I got what they call introduced to the game. So when I say the game, I'm talking about, if you grow up, it can either be, some people refer to the game as selling drugs. Some people refer to it as prostitution. And when I say prostitution, including a pimp most of the time. So when they call it the game, that's what that is. And that's where I got introduced to that was in New York. I ended up living in New York for almost 2 years. I came back to Amarillo and ended up leaving for Dallas after that. So I think I moved to Dallas in 99, and moved to Dallas in 99. And at that time, my life, from then on, it was that was how I survived. And I will, from anything from robbing men to what they call just hustling men to, literally just robbing. Through that life, I was raped. Some people might call it not rape, but it was absolutely rape. I've been locked in a basement. I've jumped out of several cars. I have, the worst of the worst in that life. But in that life, when things happen like that, you don't stop. You call it charging it to the game. That's just life. And you convince yourself that you chose that life and that is what you were made for. And you have to condition your mind for that as a survival mechanism, because otherwise you can't survive. No little girl. I went to New York to be a writer. Not that. That was not my plan. But when someone is broken inside, I think some people, people ask, well, how? It just takes a little bit of brokenness. And I want to be clear that it's not based on socioeconomics. It is based on brokenness. And it is based on the enemy grabbing a hold of you. And it is not, there's some movies like the movie Taken. There's movies and that's not what's going on. What's going on is men are manipulating our girls. They're manipulating them. They're preying on their brokenness. They're master manipulators. These pimps are master manipulators, and they prey on them. The chains are not physical. The chains are in here. And they are in here, and they are hard to break once the enemy grabs a hold of you. I went through that life, and I just, little by little, year after year, a part of me just died. I began to become completely decayed inside. And decayed. I put on a good front. I didn't live with my family. My family lived here. So when I came home, I looked, I never looked. By the grace of God, I never got on drugs. Never a drug addict. Never got alcoholism. And that is by the grace of God, because my dad, it runs in my family. So but never did that. And so, but I was dead inside. And I used to say a prayer. I talked to God all the time. All the time. Even through that life, I would talk to God. I would tell him, thank you for keeping me safe. I prayed. And I think probably the last maybe two years in my prayer, I can tell you specifically what I prayed other stuff, but I added specific, God, please take me from here. Please bless me to be a mother in your time. And please let my grandparents live to see me be a mother. Now, when I said take me from here, I did not mean die. I never wanted to take my life. So I didn't mean die. I just meant take me from this environment. And when I said bless me to be a mother, by no means did I want a child at that time. There was just no way that I thought I was prepared to be a mother. But at the age of 18, I had an abortion, and that haunted me throughout my life. And so I knew that I felt like God was going to punish me, and I would never have children because of that and because of the life I had chosen, my lifestyle. So the enemy just convinced me of that. And then why my grandparents still lived to see me be a mother, I have no idea. But I found out that I was pregnant in 2004. And I found out I was pregnant, and I was scared to death because I knew I didn't mean that I wanted to be a mother then. I thought, how can this be? So I went to a pregnancy center. I found out that, I was indeed pregnant. And I remember I just broke down to the woman and told her, this is my life. I don't know what I'm going to do. How I'm going to do this. And the receptionist just happened to overhear me. And as I was leaving, she said, I've heard of this organization called New Friends, New Life, which is an organization in Dallas that helps women get out of sexually oriented businesses. And they were huge for me because, it's easy to tell a woman, okay, and it's easy to tell somebody, okay, well, God loves you and God will change your life. But a hungry person can't hear you until they're fed. So it's easy to say that. But when you tell a woman that has a criminal background, no work history, why don't you change? Well, you don't know how. You don't know how, and you still have bills to be paid. You still have to feed yourself. So this organization is amazing. They stepped in. They actually paid my rent. They paid my car payment. They paid my stuff for 1 year. And then when I had my daughter, they still helped me out continuously. I began working, but they also helped me with daycare, everything. But my needs had to be met because you can say stop, but okay, how do I get a job? I don't even know what a resume is. I don't even know what that is. So, and there's just barriers. They put me through a class as well as how to get over barriers that taught me a lot. So then I had my daughter. And she was the best thing that ever happened. She was the one who God knew I didn't love myself enough to change, but he knew that I was going to love her enough to change. And he provided that way out. And saved not just my physical life, because I truly believe that, I could have easily been dead. I can think of 3 women that I've known over the years. One in Las Vegas who was found in a hotel room. One in Denton, Texas, a woman I knew she was like 23. And, so it's just by the grace of God that I'm here right now. Only by the grace of God. And I swore I would never come back to this town, to be honest with you all. That I will never, ever be here. And I came home. My daughter and I moved to Phoenix. We went to a church, took us to Phoenix about a year ago. And I stepped out in faith. I never lived with anyone. I've lived alone forever until I had my daughter. And but I had to, as doing missionary work, I was called to Phoenix. And went to Phoenix and did not like it. But when I was there, her spring break came, and I was not happy in the home we were living in at all. And so my director of F.R.E.E. International, who I'm missionary with, he said, we're going to get you into a resort for the week of spring break so you and your daughter can just have some time away. But I really had Amarillo on my heart. My grandmother was not well. My dad was not well. I just wanted to come home and see my family. So I prayed that night, God, if it's meant for us to go to Amarillo, and it's a long drive from Phoenix, so I'm like, if it's meant for us to go for spring break, please let every room in that resort be full. So I get a text message at like 6:30 in the morning from him that says, you're not going to believe this. Every room in the resort is full. Like, okay, we're going to Amarillo. So we came to Amarillo, and, the second day I was here, and I'm here just to visit my family, mind you. And the second day I'm here, there was a sting operation. There were six minors taken into custody, 6 minors that were found in a motel room here that were being pimped out by a guy that I went to school with. Grew up with both of his brothers, him and both of his brothers since like junior high. And so it hit my heart. It hit my heart because I've been I go to schools and do the school assemblies, but I've also been, for almost 7 years, for about 6.5 years, I've worked with girls at a facility in Dallas called Loft.Church. And I have, I was there for, like I said, 6.5 years working with girls who've been trafficked, working with girls who were just troubled, but specifically girls who had been trafficked. And so that's on my heart. When I see young girls, I have a problem with all of it because it destroys your soul. It destroys even the men who are doing the pimping, the men who are doing the buying. It destroys everybody who's involved. So I hate it all. But when it comes to minors, I'm angry. I get angry about it. And so when it happened in here, it touched me in a way that it just hadn't touched me before. And so a girl I grew up with works for CPS, and she follows me on Facebook and knows what I do. And so she had her director call me, or she asked me if I could come in and meet with her director. So I went in, and she's telling me, she's like, I've had 8 girls here in the last 2 weeks, and I've lost them because we have nowhere to place them here. There's nowhere. There's no safe house here. There's nowhere to place them. And she's like, what can we do? I'm like, I have no idea. But I left, and I knew I had to do something. And so I just started praying, and I'm like, and I'll be honest with you can't argue with God, but I certainly tried. I'm like, please do not send me back to Amarillo. Please. And I like the city. And so I'm like, please. But I kicked and screamed, and here I am. I lost. And so I knew he was calling me back home, and I knew he was calling me home. In fact, he called me right to my neighborhood. I came here, and I was like, there's no way. I drove through San Jacinto, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to live here. I'm not going to live here with my daughter. Like, this is not the same. It wasn't great when I was growing up, but certainly is worse now to be. You probably all know that. But God called me back there, and come to find out, we live next door to a woman who's got 6 great-grandchildren living with her, 3 teenagers which have been molested. One is just had a baby that's a product of rape. So I started noticing, and my husband and I started noticing, he grew up and he was in San Jacinto all through junior high too. So we realized though that God called us back to our neighborhood to reach out to the kids there, and to be the people that we needed when we were there and didn't have them. So instead of looking down on it, or, it's my neighborhood I grew up in. It's where everything started. It's where I was born, raised, same house. It's like, home. And that's what I'm doing now in my life. But I want to share with you guys, though, I know a lot of people, you're probably wondering, well, what can we do, and how does this affect us? And it is easy to overlook it, and it's easy to judge. It's easy to judge until it affects you personally. I know my mother has spent many nights crying, and, she said many times that, she was honest. She said, I probably would have judged you. I would have judged another woman, judged a stranger. But now that it's my daughter, it's totally different. And so, but I just think God called us. He commands us. God commands us to care for people. Not a cause, but for people. And I just think it's so important that, you start reaching out to the people around you and trying to see the children around you. Because as much as important as rescuing is, prevention is absolutely equally as important. Prevention is key. And not just with the girls, but the boys. Our young boys, teaching them against porn. Porn drives prostitution. And now that we have the internet, you can literally set... I don't know if any of you know what Backpage is, but I would encourage you all to go home today and pull it up on your computer, because people say, oh, that's not happening in my town. But you pull up Backpage and you pull up escorts, and you will see girl after girl after girl for sale. You can buy a TV, you can order a pizza, and you can also have a girl delivered right here in Amarillo, Texas. And it is astounding at how many girls are on there. And you can look at their faces, and you can tell. Some of them are older, but if you look at their faces, you can tell that they are babies, And if you ask me, just because somebody turns 18, that does not make them, that is not an adult. Psychologists say that our brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. So that's why I think you see so many kids going off to college, intelligent, go to Ivy League schools, but end up drinking or whatever, because the brain is not fully developed until up to 25. So it's just so important to look at the people around you, see the people around you, to pray. And I know this town needs a safe home. I don't know if, there should be someone to step up and say, I have this house, and give this house. But I can tell you right now, after speaking with CPS, they are losing girl after girl after girl right here because there's nowhere for them to go. So they're sending them right back to the hell they came from. And sometimes that hell is better than the hell they had at home, which is even worse. But we need mentors for our boys, for our men, not just the girls, but for all of our youth. And I can tell you, I grew up, so many people here, and it breaks my heart, but I can name on both hands a handful of pimps that are right here in Amarillo. We have the I-40 corridor, so there is a lot of people that pass through here, and they will put on here, if you look on Backpage, passing through, they're coming from Las Vegas. They come from when they're making a cross-country tour with their pimp. They're traveling, they're coming through here, but there are many that are based here, and their pimps take them to Dallas or wherever to make money, but they're also right here, Midland and Odessa, because of the oil. Big time prostitution going on in the little towns of Midland and Odessa right now. So it's happening all over here. And like I said, I don't know, but a safe home is needed here. I don't know, who or how can make it happen, but I would suggest that as a church, you pray hard to make it happen, because it's needed. It's needed. And then there's just a few facts I want to share with you. One is that the average age for a girl to enter prostitution is 13 years old. So even when you look at a woman who is maybe, let's say, a 30-year-old prostitute, and you might want to automatically judge that woman, but you have to remember that that woman very likely did not become a prostitute at 30. Her mind is still left at whatever her trauma occurred at. So you're dealing with a 13-year-old girl still but a 30-year-old woman. And so it's just so important to not judge, because so sadly as it is, so many people are afraid to come to the church because they're afraid of being judged. And that is not what the church is supposed to be doing. The church, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility. And we can pretend like you can leave here today and ignore it, but you can never again say you don't know what's happening here, because it is. And so now it's like, you read a sad story in a magazine and you cry, and then you flip the page and you've forgotten about it. But this is not something to forget about. This is something that's important. It's taking our kids. It's destroying our youth. And with the internet, I cannot stress to you enough. I had a girl live with me and my daughter. I brought a girl into our home from the juvenile detention center. I walked with her for 3 years until she aged out. When she aged out, I brought her into my home. She stayed with us, and we were in Dallas. And she and her cousin both had lived in the country, maybe like 45 minutes outside of Dallas. She would have never, ever, ever known what prostitution was had it not been for the internet. And she told me I would come home and get a click on my computer from a guy, and it would excite me. She ended up getting a click from the wrong guy, eventually, from a pimp. And both she and her cousin, at the age of 15, one was 14, one was 15, ended up with the pimp in Dallas. And by the grace of God, I'm so proud of that young lady now, because she ended up pregnant as she was living with me, but she's on the right track right now. She's an excellent mother, and she's doing good, but her cousin is still in that life. But it's just the internet. Monitor your kids. Monitor. Again, it's not based on socioeconomics. It's based on brokenness. It's based on the enemy grabbing a hold of anyone who has a little bit of brokenness. You can have a 2-parent home, but the dad is not there. He can be there physically, but he's not there emotionally. And so it can happen in any kind of home. It's not just happening in a certain neighborhood, a low-income neighborhood. It's happening everywhere. I think I'm pretty safe to say that, like, my aunt and my mother, my family would have never assumed that would be the route that would happen to me. So it can happen to anyone's daughter. And I just want to let you know that I firmly believe that they're all of our daughters. And we have to see kids as our own kids. See them as your kids. Don't see them as someone else. Love them like you would love your own. Love them like the Lord commands us to do, to love our neighbors. Love the kids. Reach out to them. Like I said, when my husband and I are trying to start building in our neighborhood, and when I lived in Dallas, I started reaching out to the kids in my neighborhood, the teens. I started every morning before, there's a high school down the street. So every Wednesday, it was Donut Day Wednesday. It started out with me connecting with 2 girls as I was walking in the morning, and connecting with them and taking 2 donuts to like 15 kids waiting for donuts every Wednesday sometimes. Some days they didn't want to talk to me. They would just come and get the donuts, walk away. And then other days they would share with me their stories, and they were sad stories, So I would just encourage you to reach out in whatever way God puts on your heart. And what I did want to say is, again, the average age is 13. And then also what a lot of people don't know is that human trafficking is the second largest, fastest growing crime in the United States. Drug dealers, like I said, the internet, and then drug dealers, people who sold dope, are now caught on to the fact that they can hide behind a woman. Because I can tell you right now, it is nearly impossible to get a girl or a woman to press charges on her pimp. It doesn't happen. It's very rare. She's so brainwashed, so scared that she's not going to turn on her pimp, and these men know that. You make a drug transaction, you make that transaction one time, it's done. You can sell a girl over and over and over. So a lot of the people who once sold drugs are now turning to pimping because it's safer for the man who's hiding behind the woman. So I guess that's it, and I'd like to, we're going to show a short video shortly of what I do now with F.R.E.E. International and the school assemblies. If any one of you have access to the school, to how to get a school going on here, to get an assembly here, I encourage it. I have spoke to over 300,000 students in the last 3 years, 2.5 years in schools. We have located missing girls through students watching. We have had assemblies where the kids will come up and say, you know what, I think my friend is in this, and actually found girls that through teens in their neighborhood, in their areas, that know girls that have been trafficked that the FBI has actually been looking for, and we've been able to contact our connections with the FBI and locate them, and that has come through the students in the schools. It's a phenomenal assembly. It needs to be in every school. I'm going to, the end of this month, I go to Boston. And then November, we're scheduled to go to Mississippi. We're going back to North Dakota. I've been to North Dakota 5 times. I don't know if you all realize it, but it's an area in North Dakota called the Bakken. And it is, you wouldn't think North Dakota, but there's an oil boom there right now. You research it, you will be dumbfounded, and you will be just astonished. They have what they call man camps. And it's just camp after camp because men are going there for the oil fields. And so there's girls just being trafficked back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. In fact, it's so, just to give you an idea how bad it is there, when I was talking to the hotel clerk the last time I was in North Dakota, or the time before I was in North Dakota, speaking with the hotel clerk, and he asked me about what we were doing there. And I told him, and he just had this look on his face, and he said, that's what I do. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, which end are we talking about? I'm not clear. And then I realized that that's all he checks in and out of that hotel. So he identified himself with being a part of the problem. He's like, I see that. That's all we do. He said, I see girls coming. He said they come in groups of 2 and 3, and they come from like New York and Las Vegas. He said, and they fly in, and he said, and they're just having fun making money. I said, no. I said, and likely they're not friends. They're what they call wife-in-laws. So when a pimp has girls or women, they're called wife-in-laws. And so I said, they're likely here. They're not here partying. They're giving you that assumption, but I assure you they're not here having fun, doing what they're doing. And they're here together, and there's usually a main one, what they call is a bottom B, and they call that. And so that woman, that girl is going to be usually, he's usually got her brain the tightest, hold on her, and so she's going to be the one. The girls are so brainwashed that they will travel around the country, and they will actually Western Union their pimp money every day. At the end of that day, they will Western Union him everything they've made. And so anyhow, but that's the guy in this little town, Williston, North Dakota, which is a tiny little depressing, evil town now. But anyhow, so I want you to see the assemblies in a few minutes and see what exactly the assembly does. But first I want to ask you all if you have any questions for me. I try to be as transparent as possible and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
You have me on? Okay. And I just want to ask, if you do have a question, go ahead and just stand up. I'll come as quickly as I can to you. And try to make your questions very direct and very short as far as, for times. That way we can get in as many as we can. Does anybody have a question? Everybody's just in shock right now.
So what I want to know is, how were you able to get out of it? How were you able to walk away? And do they not come after you? Do they not try to find you?
Sure, absolutely. That's a good question. At the time, my situation was a little different, and I was not with a pimp. And so when I say that the enemy, I could tell you Satan was pimping me, to be honest with you. In a church, I can say that. Because my mind was completely chains on my mind. So at that moment, I was 26 years old when I had my child, and I did not have a pimp. Her father is still in that life, but that would take a whole nother hour. But no, I did not have a problem. And but most cases, to be honest with you, pimps are cowards. So you get I'll be honest, you come from a neighborhood where there's drug dealers and there's pimps. Drug dealers are going to scream out, "Send me to prison. I don't care. Send me to prison. I'll do whatever." Now, they may come out of prison with a different mentality, but that's what they run around screaming. Where pimps tend to call themselves gentlemen of leisure, and they're not going to, they brainwash the woman. But most of them are scared of prison. They're scared of confrontation, which is why they chose that. But the woman may be believing that, or the girl may be believing that he's going to come after her, but let's say 9 times out of 10, that's not going to be the case. Now, maybe after he's been with her for a long time, he's going to be, they're abusive, so the girl believes she can't leave, but most of the time, they're not going to, they can get another girl. It's not hard for them to replace that one girl. They're going to make her think it is, but then they replace her. And so it's not, they have a saying that you can leave, but you leave with what you came with. That's what the pimps say. You can leave, but leave with what you came with.
Hey, anybody else?
So when you talking about a safe house and Amarillo needs one, what does that look like? What kind of house are you talking about? What kind of staffing's required? Stuff like that.
I worked in a facility, or I volunteered for the years in Dallas with a facility, but I'll be honest, I don't think a facility is what they need. I think that if, around the country there are several safe houses, and there are ones that are what I envision, and I think is what I have, after traveling around the country and seeing different facilities, what I think is best is a home. A home environment where, of course, you have to have safety measures set up and so forth. But there's a place in Phoenix I found I loved. It was a house. My daughter and I spent the night there one night, just for the experience. And it was empty, so she told us we were living with a horrible woman at the church. So this lady that I connected with said, "Why don't you and your daughter, we don't have any girls in the house right now, so y'all come stay here at the safe house." So we went and we spent the night there. And it was just, all the rooms are set up where each girl has a bedroom. And it's like her own bedroom. Where it feels like a home and like a family, and they do yoga, and they do have somebody come in and do art with them, and of course, you need counseling and all of those things as well, but also just, they would go on outings, which I love, to like the museums, and expose them to things that they would have otherwise not been exposed to. But just a holistic healing. There's another home I love. They have a garden, and so the girls they grow their own stuff in the garden, and then they learn to cook, and they all cook together. I thought that was fantastic. But learn to be kids again too. They've already been forced to make adult decisions, but I've learned even in the detention center that you get all that stuff down. You take their masks off, and they're still kids. They still love to color. They still love to, all kinds of stuff. I absolutely loved working with the girls in the detention center, and you see the child in them again. And but a home like that, I envision a home where if that girl graduates college and here's Thanksgiving, she can still come home to that home for Thanksgiving. Yes, there's several, and I would love to talk with you more about it. I have a card, but there's several and different models. But for me, what I've seen, what I think is the best, is a home that gives them a sense of home. And one thing that's important, though, when you're dealing with girls, that I learned on my own, by observing in the detention center, I would go in and, I did everything with them from, teaching them about Maya Angelou. Not a lot of people know Maya Angelou was a prostitute and a madam. I don't know, but a lot of people don't know that. So reading and teaching the girls, educating them on her, and showing her, telling them this, and then showing her next to the president at the inauguration. That's powerful. And teaching them about Helen Keller, everything from arts and crafts, providing Thanksgiving meals for them, but doing a lot of, and then just talking about life some days, But what I learned when I started applying, because we always do biblical stuff as well, there's always God involved. But what I learned is you can't tell a girl, oh, God loves you. Oh, God loves you. And I remember when I really clicked with me, I kept referring to God as a he. And then all of a sudden I realized I would have girls engaging in the conversation. And then the minute I started referring to God as a he, they would just sit back. Because a he is the one who has abused them all of their life. So identifying God as a he was hard. So I realized I learned from that. I remember one of the first girls I met, she was 14, and she was in there for prostitution. And she had been molested by her grandfather her whole life, who was a pastor. So that was awakening for me. He was a pastor. Her grandma would take her to church on Sunday, Wednesday, everything, and come home to her grandpa, who she just left the church from. So a lot of these girls have been misfed the gospel, just very misfed, and have a very distorted view on who our God is, who Christ is.
And stay right there.
You said that there's an organization that you work for. In that organization, are all the women that work with you, are their lives similar to yours?
Actually, no. What's phenomenal about F.R.E.E. International, because I founded an organization called Vashti's Voice. And that's, that was in Dallas, and I've kind of put that to the side, working with F.R.E.E. International. But what I love about F.R.E.E. International, to all of you men, is it is head up. It was founded by a man. And it is led by, I'm actually the only one on there that came from that life. But they're all missionaries, and they're all ordained pastors. But there's the executive director. Everybody on my team that I travel with is men, which you could have never told me. I remember we were in the middle of North Dakota, in the middle driving of nowhere. And one of them said, I bet you never imagined that you'd be sitting in a truck full of 4 men and traveling to do school assemblies in the middle of nowhere. And I laughed. I'm like, no. And I'm very close with all of their wives as well. In fact, the executive director flew in for my wedding from Las Vegas. And one of the men who's a pastor on my team, he's like my spiritual father. His name is Lowell, and you'll see him in the video in a moment. But he came to perform the ceremony. He flew from Montana to perform our ceremony. So they're amazing men of God. But I just love the fact that men took this upon themselves to head this up. Like, that's amazing to me. And they've given me such hope in men as well. They've been great role models for me.
Okay, when you're doing these, when the girls go into these programs, do they also go hand in hand with a recovery type group? Because I know for a fact that the pimp game is hand in hand with dope.
Well, see, and there, to be honest with you, there's a big misconception there as well. A lot of pimps will put girls on drugs, but to be honest with you, I can tell you that a huge majority of pimps, I would say 85%, don't want their girls on drugs. And you know why? Because once the drug has the girl, the pimp loses her mind. It's all mind control. So once the pimp has her, once she's on drugs, the pimp has now lost her. She can go on a call or go on a thing with a John. He's got cocaine. Well, that girl's gone. She's going to sit in that room, and she's going to be gone, and that pimp has lost her. So I've actually seen two pimps that I know, one in New York, one from Las Vegas, one who sent his girl to an alcohol treatment center because that was an investment for him, and one who sent the girl to a drug treatment center because that was his investment. Both of those women had been with him for a matter of years, and they didn't want to lose them, so they sent them to get help.
Hey, anybody else? We got maybe time for maybe just two more, and that's it. Now or never. Okay. All right. Tekla, thank you so much. Oh. I know she wants to show this video. Did you want to talk about it afterwards, too? I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
So this is the video of, it's just a brief clip of the assemblies that we do, just to give you an idea of what it is we do. And again, if any of you have access to get them brought to Amarillo, it would be fantastic. I will tell you that a day of assemblies is $5,000. Bringing all of the equipment, once you see this, you'll kind of get a better idea, but it's flying. Our whole team is placed all over the country. One in Montana, the people who actually put it together, who are necessary to be there. But it is necessary, it's needed. I can tell you it's needed in our junior highs and our high schools desperately, and it's been so effective. We did it in New Orleans at the Super Bowl. Schools didn't want us in. They're like, no. So we had very few schools. Once we did that, they contacted us back. We're like, please, come to every school we have. After that, when we did the governor of New York contacted us, had us come. They had us in New Jersey prior to the Super Bowl year before last for 2 weeks. They asked us to go to every school in New Jersey. We couldn't do every school, but we did half of New Jersey in 2 weeks.
Hey, Tekla, will you do me a favor real quick? Will you explain why Super Bowl is?
Sure.
Because you keep saying Super Bowl,
Okay,
and maybe people don't understand why that's a key time.
So anytime, and I'll be honest, it's a little overrated nowadays because pimps have become so used to the Super Bowl being a big deal that they stay away because there's sting operations everywhere you look. But anytime there's an influx in men, an influx in people, there's going to be prostitution. So pimps actually get online and will search out, every kind of conventions. I mean, and we're talking about, there's obviously every level of every kind of everything. But there are intelligent pimps who, had they been reared in the right direction, could have done amazing things. And they are business savvy, and they are savvy, so they are on it, on what cities, what states, what conventions are going on. So when the Super Bowl comes, there's a huge influx of people and men, and so with that comes all the ugly stuff as well. So what we do for the Super Bowls, we usually go a week to 2 weeks prior to the Super Bowl, leading up to it, and go into the schools and do the assemblies, and just make them aware, make the students aware that there's going to be pimps in the area, make girls aware, and it's been very effective. Cindy McCain, after we did the one in New York, the governor, Cindy McCain contacted us to come do the Super Bowl in Phoenix last year, and now we're set up for California here in a few months as well.
Go ahead and show the video.
Walking up to everybody in school, boom, welcome to Earth. I'm popping out of people's lockers, boom, welcome to Earth. I'm like popping out of people's mashed potatoes at lunch, boom, welcome to Earth. Here, you get that mashed potatoes all over me, boom, prove yourself up.
Today we're going to talk about some things that stink, some things that are smelling up our schools, our communities, the world we live in. And I got to tell you something today, that not a lot of people like to talk about those kinds of things, but we're going to get in there and dig it up because something smells and it's time to deal with it.
You see, there was a young 14-year-old girl. They were literally pimping her out of her own house. They were selling her on the street at night, getting her back to her own home in time for her to take a shower and get back to school. As we talked to this young lady, she said, listen, my friends knew the trouble I was in. Some of my teachers knew the trouble I was in, but nobody was willing to say anything. If somebody would have just been brave enough to say something, maybe I wouldn't be in the hell that I am in right now. You see, history begins today. There's enough hurt and there's enough pain in this world. That's not hard to find. But when you come into this place, when you come into this school, you start caring for one another. You start having each other's back.
I'm gonna tell people to say something, like not be a loner or not keep it inside and hurting themselves. Tell people to to speak out.
Well, I'm just inspired to help people, like just help people who are molested, who are not cared for right.
That you do not take advantage for others, and you should stand up for each other.
It's inspiring for people to come down here and tell us that, because a lot of kids committed suicide last year in several schools.
If you see something, you have to tell somebody, tell an adult or something like that. Because there's a lot of things these days that are just crazy.
I would really talk to people, encourage them. I would just encourage them. Yeah.
I would talk to people. I would tell adults about what was happening, and to encourage people to tell them stop doing this. It's not right.
I believe this is something that needs to be shared, not just with McMain, of course, with all the schools, because all young people need to be exposed to the fact that no matter what you're going through, no matter who you come across that's negative toward you, that there is somebody who loves you, there is somebody who cares.
What helps is somebody that's willing, when they see something that's not right, to step up and say something. When they hear somebody that's getting involved in things that they should never get involved in, say something.
All these things that were bottled up inside me started to come out. They were just screaming to be released and screaming to be heard. And I needed healing and I needed help. I told 3 different people what had happened. They started seeing the depression in me, anorexia, and different things like that.
Silence isn't golden. Silence is a weapon of evil.
It's a tremendous impact having you guys with us today. The students and the staff have been very positive about the presentation, and if it means something just for one student here today, it was worth the investment of time.
Say something.
So say something. Talking to you, audience, say something.
Say something.
So this is a mechanism to let them know there's something else that you can do, something else you can rely on, and another source of your strength.